So last week I looked at the parable of the Good Samaritan, and we looked at the story within the story, and we found out that the Good Samaritan was actually Jesus Christ, and that the man he was helping on that road was mankind who was falling down, leaving the high place in Jerusalem and going down into the low places, going down into sin. And the Good Samaritan, Jesus, was there to save mankind from eternal death. And so this morning I want to talk to you about another parable. I got stuck in parables here, so I might even continue with one next week, I'm thinking. I'm not sure. But I want to talk to you about this parable. And this one speaks of money. And it's interesting, if you look in the Bible, that Jesus spends about 1/6 of the time in the red words in the Bible. If you read them all, about 1/6 of the time in the red words, he speaks of money or wealth or income or something of that nature. He specifically speaks of money, or he just alludes to it a lot of time directly or indirectly. And also about 12, I believe it's 12 of the, it could be 38, or some people say there's 38 parables, some say there's as many as 43. The 38 seems to be the one that everybody's falling on. So when you look at the parables, 12 of the 38 parables talk about money or riches as well too. So there's a lot of talk about money in the Bible. And so this morning what I want to do is I want to invite you to a dinner party. And this dinner party is with Jesus and his disciples. And they're the invited guest. And we find this dinner party in the book of Luke in chapter 14. But this wasn't your run-of-the-mill dinner party. This wasn't like a friendly dinner party where you might go to somebody's house and expect to have a good conversation. The Pharisees here were trying to trick Jesus and to get him into get him into trouble, I guess, to say the wrong thing. Specifically this time, I think they wanted him to break the law. Remember, the law said no working, you shouldn't do any work on the Sabbath, and so this was on the Sabbath. But before they could ask him a question, Jesus came through, and they asked in this part of the story, he asked them a question first. So before they could trick him up, obviously he understood what they were going to do, and so he asked them the first question. Here's how it happened in Luke 14. It says, "It happened that when he went into the house of one of the leaders of the Pharisees on the Sabbath to eat bread," that's the dinner party they were having. When he went to that dinner party, they were watching him closely, and there in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Now, dropsy today, I think if you're in the medical field, is like, they call it edema. I think it's called edema. And it's basically the swelling of the lower part of the body. It's where your legs fill up with fluids. And so in verse 3, Jesus responded to them, and he said to the lawyers and Pharisees, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" And we know that they said there was no working on the Sabbath. So Jesus is giving them this question. First off, they brought this man here. And notice it says in the other verse, it said he was sitting in front of them. So they brought him here. They had this plan. We'll put this guy in front of Jesus, and he'll see him. He'll want to heal him. If he heals him, boom, he's out of here. We've got him because he worked on the Sabbath. So back to verse 3, it says, "And Jesus responded and said to the lawyers and Pharisees, 'Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?' But they kept silent, and he took hold of him," this is the man with the dropsy, "and healed him and sent him away. And then he said, 'Which one of you will have a son or an ox fall into a well and will not immediately pull him out on the Sabbath?'" Gotcha. See it? And they could offer no reply to this, because what did Jesus do? The right thing. It's the right thing. There's a difference between working on a Sunday. Ian, would you go and check in There's a difference between working on a Sunday and there's on a Sabbath. I'm sorry, I think somebody fell. There's a difference on working on the Sabbath, and there's between a difference of working and healing is what I'm trying to say. Healing is not work. Healing is something that needs to be done. And so Jesus showed them that yes, the law says don't work, but that doesn't on the Sabbath, but there's a difference between arbitrary work and healing or saving others. See, there's a difference between just going out to work on the Sabbath and actually healing others. And this dinner party lasted all day long, and it's well documented. If you go home tonight, it's well documented in 3.5 chapters. This is how long this dinner party was. It was an all-day event. 3.5 chapters in the book of Luke, in chapters 14, 15, 16, and then parts of 17. So when you go home tonight, if you'd like to join this dinner party and find out exactly what happened during that whole day, you can start in Luke 14 and read 14, 15, 16, and into 17. But for this morning, I'm going to turn to chapter 16, because this is where the parable I found that I want to talk to you about. It's in chapter 16. And here's what it says. Now he, Jesus, was also saying to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and this manager was reported to him as squandering his possessions. So in this parable, there was a rich man who was reportedly squandering, there was a manager who was reportedly squandering the man he worked for, his riches, stealing from him, basically, is what he was doing, cheating his boss, if you will. And in verse 2, we found out that as soon as the rich man found out about this, he summoned him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an accounting on your management, for you can no longer be a manager. Now, this is probably one of the hardest to understand parables in the Bible, because what happened next, you'll probably think to yourself, what's going on? What's happening? So here's what's going on. As soon as the rich man discovered what his manager was doing, he fired him. He got rid of him. He called him to him. He gave him an account of what he was doing, and he fired him. And when he did, he said, get out of here. I mean, you're done. This is it. His life basically ended right there, because he would have been boarding and housed with this rich man. As his manager, he would have had his house, his meal, everything would have been taken for him, even his clothes would have been. But now he has nothing. He's basically going to go out on the street. And in verses 3 and 4, we learn that the manager said to himself, what am I to do? Where will I go, and how will I live? My master is taking the management away from me, and I'm not strong enough to dig, and I am too ashamed to beg. So the manager came up with a plan, and in verse 4 he said, I know what I'll do. This manager said, I know what I'll do, so that when I'm removed from the management, people will welcome me into their home. That's pretty good, isn't it? I know what I'll do. I'll take care of this situation right now. He says, I've got this. I'm about to lose my job. I'm about to lose my home. I'm about to lose my income and everything I have, my comfort. But I have a plan, and my plan will make my bosses, creditors, richer. My plan will make my bosses, creditors, richer. He said, and here's what I'll do. In verse 5, he said, and he summoned each one of his master's debtors, and he began saying to the first, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 jugs of oil. And he said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. So I'm the rich guy. Here's the manager. He goes to my creditors. This guy owes me 100 barrels of oil, but he says, no, write down 50. I'll take care of it. My master will never know. Don't worry about it. And the thing to know here is that it was very common in that time, and it was a law that the Jews could not collect interest on money. So if I was to loan you $100, I couldn't add interest to it. I couldn't say, I'll loan you $100 and it's $10 a month a month interest until you pay me back the $100. It was against the law. And so what they did then was they traded commodities and they traded services, because there was no law on charging interest with those. So if you needed oil and came to me and said, I really need some oil, I can't run my house without the oil, I need 100 jugs of oil, I'd say, okay, I'll give you 100 jugs of oil, but now you owe me 200. You see what's going on? Now you owe me 200 because I can get my interest on that. I'm not going to loan you any money, but I'll make a lot of money on loaning you goods. And they could charge exorbitant rates. They could charge 100% or more. It was between the individuals, and it was between the party how much interest was going to be. So this manager was essentially giving his creditors a break on their and robbing his rich man of the money that was due to him. And verse 8, the master complimented the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. Now, isn't that weird? This manager does this to this rich man, and he compliments him. Why didn't he condemn him instead of complimenting him? He should have condemned him and said, I've just fired you, get out of here, and you're condemned. But he said, no. He said, his master complimented the unrighteous man because he acted shrewdly, and he said, the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And this is where some people just drop the parable and just don't understand it. They just let it go and say, I don't understand what this is. Because, of course, the children of light are the sons of God. We know that. We have the children of darkness and the children of light. And the question is why does the manager, or Jesus in this case, who is telling this story, why does the master commend this thief and not condemn him? That's the question. And to understand the parable, we have to understand that he's not commending him on cheating. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying, oh, good boy, you cheated. That's the best thing you could do. No, he's telling us he's commending him because he took care of his future. He knew how to get out of the situation that he was in. He knew he was going to lose everything. He knew he was pretty much dead. He knew he had no home, no family, no food, no income. And he made a way for himself because he said, if I help these creditors, they'll help me in return. I'll be loved by them. He planned his future ahead, and that's what Jesus commended him upon. And I think I find this, well, I don't think, I do find this rather comforting, don't you? Because what's happening here is Jesus is finding something good in a guy that's terrible. Does that make sense? Jesus is finding something good in a guy that's terrible, and he's finding something good in each and every one of us as time goes on too. No matter how mean, nasty, and terrible we are, he'll always find the good in us. We're always available to us because of the goodness that he can find in us. I guess what he's saying is, as children of light, we are not quite so shrewd and quite so interested in our future. I mean, we are in the sense that we know we're saved, right? We know we're saved. We know that we're going to heaven. And sometimes we just sit back and say, I've got this comfortable life. I don't have to do a thing. I'm comfortable. I'm well fed. I'm taken care of, and I don't have to do a thing. But Jesus goes on, and he says this. In Luke 9, he says, and I say to you, make friends for yourself by means of the wealth of unrighteousness. This is confusing. So that when it is all gone, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings. Now let's break that down, because that seems kind of weird too, doesn't it? The whole parable's hard to understand. It says, and I say to you, make friends for yourself by means of the wealth of righteousness. You have to understand that the original word here is mammon, which means money. So he says to you, make friends for yourself by the money of unrighteousness. And what is happening here in that time is that's not just money that you can take out of your pocket and put on the table. It's also a deity. And the deity, small g, the god with a small g, was called Mammon. That was the god's name. And the Philistines and the Canaanites and other areas of the world at that time worshipped this god Mammon. He was the god of money, the god that would give you riches. If you prayed to him, you'd have everything. Kind of sounds like the prosperity gospel we have today in our church, doesn't it? Have you heard about that? Yeah, get up, come give me money. Pray for money, it'll happen today. Serve Mammon. Serve your money and ask the God, the small g, and he'll give you money today. And that's basically what was happening. And so there's actually a physical reality to this story as well as a spiritual reality, that people were literally serving this god Mammon. And that's demons. Basically, they're demons, and they're trying to trick us into following money and taking our way off the Lord's. And it says, make friends with this unrighteous money. Well, why would he want us to make friends with that unrighteous money? Well, it's in the translation. It's not friends, it's tame. The word really translates into tame. So it means go out and capture this wild creature and tame it. So tame your money. Hold on to your money. It's unrighteous. Most money is unrighteous. And that's not that it's earned unrighteously. We do work fine, that's righteous money. But a lot of money that we yearn for and receive is just unrighteous money. We don't really deserve it in that sense. And he's saying, tame that money, because that's the money we tend to spend on the wrong things. Make sense? Tame that money. And then look at our verse again. What does it say? The final verse, the final few words. And you will receive into you your eternal dwellings. When it's gone, it's over. When the money's gone, when you're gone, when we're dead, it's over. It's done. Can't count your pennies on the way to heaven, can you? You can't do it. And so when it's done, it's over. So make sure you used it wisely. Why? So you'll obtain your eternal dwelling and not the other dwelling, eternal dwelling here. Meaning get it under controls. Be friendly with it in the sense that you are able to tame it and make sure that we control it so it doesn't control us. So it's good. It is, money sometimes is like controlling a wild beast, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how many times I've felt really rich because all of a sudden, where this might come from? Oh, wow, this is great. You know, I can't give you an example, but all of a sudden I say, wow, I got something extra in my checkbook. What am I going to spend it on? That's the first thing you say sometimes. What am I going to spend it on? And then that's where we have to tame it. We just can't spend it on whatever we want. We have to think about what we're doing with it. So here's the heart of the matter. Jesus says in verse 10, the one who is faithful in a very little thing is also faithful in much, and the one who is unrighteous in a very little thing is also unrighteous in much. So he says, if you can trust this little thing, if you can trust this little tiny thing called mammon, called money, it's no big deal. It's a bunch of coins. But if you can tame that, then you can tame little things like that, then you can tame big things. Then I'll give you big things. But if we're unfaithful with our little things, with money, and we haven't tamed it, then we can't receive the true riches that he wants to give us in our afterlife and here. Think about it. And here too, in the church. And you might think this story is about tithing, and it really isn't. It is in a way, in the sense that that's one way to tame unrighteous money, but I'm not really talking about money as coins either. It's what you can do with it out there to spread his word. So is it tithing? Yes, in a way it's tithing. But I know what you folks are doing, and I know that you're giving, the church is blessed as a whole. So that's not really this isn't a message on tithing. It's a message on what we do and how generous we are behind the scenes. And I can tell you right now, I know what you do and how generous you are. And I'm telling you, you guys are amazing. And if you don't know what's going in the church, let me tell you. I mean, we have people walking out into the streets and helping people. We have people going to their homes and helping people. I've had people write checks and say, this family needs that. I've had people write checks and say, this family needs this. We've all written something to somebody and giving something to somebody, whether it's our time, our energy, our money, or whatever. But it's a very giving congregation that we have here. And I'm so very happy that it's this way. We have meals we give out. There's aid, there's care. You guys have really tamed your mammon. You really have tamed your mammon. So don't let it become wild again. Keep it tamed. And while they may be known by me, and more importantly, all of the good things you do is known by who? Him. That's right. He knows behind everything that you're doing. So, according to our verse, if we're faithful in little things, he'll give us bigger things. Now, you can't hear me sing. I don't sing really well. I had one gentleman, he's not here today, but I said, years ago when I first started as a pastor, I could play guitar and sing. And he looked at me and said, no, you could never sing. I said, well, you're right, but I did play guitar. But there's a lot of things I can do, and there's a lot of things I can't do. I can't figure out the logistics that the ladies have on feeding everybody here, how much food to get. I mean, if I was in the kitchen and said we got to have food and we got to feed everybody here, you have to be enough food to feed a neighborhood, because I just can't figure how much. I just figure everybody's going to need as much as I do, so we need a lot. So there's things I can't do. I can't run the visual or the audio ministry. I have no clue. That board up there looks like a spaceship to me. And the computer, I would push all kinds of buttons. But there is one thing I can do, and that's minister. Minister and manage. And so we all have a gift. And that gift that we have is used to enhance the church. It's used to enhance and to help each other. And that's my ministry. But guess what? We all have what in common? Money. No matter what your ministry is, no matter what you do for the church, no matter what you like to do, we all have money in common. And looking down the road, I really do see the opportunity for more and more ministries here, which means we need more and more people to say, let me run that ministry, let me do that ministry, let me control that ministry, let me take charge in that ministry. And that's what it's all about. So then we can use the money that the church has to give you, in that sense, a budget to say, run your ministry. You see, we're taming money. We're taming the money that we receive here. We tame it by paying our bills. We tame it by paying a lot of stuff. But I want to see it by paying more ministries. So if you have an idea for a ministry, let me know. I'd really like to maybe open some more ministries. I know there's a lot of need out there. I think it was Moody that said, I can see more about the spirituality of a man by reading through his checkbook than I can by reading through his prayer book. See, I can tell you more about your morality and who you are by looking at your checkbook than your prayer book. And I think that's interesting. I like to think about it this way. When Sherry and I were first married, we shopped in Montreal all the time in Canada. And the reason we shopped in Canada was because, if you remember, back in the 70s, late 70s, this would have been 78 and 79, 45 years ago, we would shop in Canada because the American dollar was worth like $1.35 in Canadian money, and then the Canadian goods were cheaper in the first place. So I don't know if we were paying 50 cents for a gallon of gas back then. You could buy gas in Montreal for 35 cents a gallon, or you could buy food a lot cheaper. And so we would go to the bank and they would take currency. They didn't charge anything, and we turned in back then maybe, I don't know, $40, which was a lot of money back then, into Canadian money, and we'd end up with 55 or something dollars on top of it, or more, $60 maybe, and take it to Canada and really get our money's worth. So we were exchanging one type of money for another type of money. Today we're doing the same thing here. Today you're doing the same thing here. You're exchanging your mammon here for earthly riches, for heavenly riches, aren't you? You're taking that money here, again, in your ministries, in your tithing, in the streets, in the things that you do, and you're taming that mammon, and you're putting it into your efforts to help other people. And what's that giving you in return? A lot more than 35%. A lot more than 35%. Verse 11 says, 11 and 12, therefore, if you've not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you with true wealth to you? And if you have not been faithful in the use of what is another's, who will give you that which is your own? Everything belongs to God. Everything is His. Everything we have to understand that. It's extremely important to understand that we have nothing. It really is. And once you can tame that and get that and understand that everything you have comes from Him. Everything. The clothes on your back, your house, your cars, your families, everything you have comes directly from Him. It's His blessing. Each dollar we spend investing in others will one day come back to us in riches. Look at verse 13. We'll finish with that. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. In 1 Timothy, Paul said money is the root of all evil. And just like the clay dolls or clay idols and the false gods in the Bible that are mentioned in the Bible, just as they were behind them were powerful spiritual forces, behind money is a powerful spiritual force. Those little gods exist. Those little gods with little g's today, we call them demons, but they exist. And so if we got a bunch of money in our pocket, there's somebody tapping on our shoulder saying, hey, why don't we do this with it? Why don't we do that? It's a reality, whether we believe it or not, it's a reality. The coins in our pockets tend to seek us before we can seek them. And we're either going to bow down to those coins or we're going to bow down to the one true God. I used to play the lottery. It was a harmless game, I thought. Years ago, it was a harmless game. Listen, I was working, I was making good money, so you bought a ticket on Saturday for $10 and you had a chance to win $1 million or more. Pretty good odds, I guess. Well, not good odds, but it's not, it wasn't going to break me. And then they said, well, this is good. The Lottery Commission said, let's get a Wednesday darn. I said, well, I'm in. So now I got Saturday and I got Wednesday. And then they said, well, this is working good. Let's get scratch-offs. Well, there we are. I don't have to wait for Wednesday and Saturday. I can get some money right now if I'm lucky, right? And that wasn't taming my money. That's not what we're talking about. That's money in our pockets that tames us. And I wasn't going to receive any riches from it. And what would happen if I won $1 million? What would happen if you win $1 million? Can you imagine that? I don't even want to imagine it because I don't know what I would do, but I don't think it would be, there wouldn't be a lot of God maybe in it. There'd be a lot of, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And so I quit the lottery. Why? Because I wasn't trusting him in his plan for me. You see? And so I gave up playing the lottery years and years and years ago, and you know what happened to me? Blessing, 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 blessing. I want this for you, Ray, and I will give it to you. Don't take a chance dealing with this small God. Take a chance dealing with this big God. I was telling God, I don't trust you for my future. I've got to take care of that myself. You know, and then I can say to myself, well, I'm going to really be righteous with it, right? I'm going to go out tomorrow and start playing because I'm going to build a big church. I'm going to build a big church, right? It's going to be a $1 million church on 50 acres, and we're going to have this and this and this and this and this and all this and all this. And God's going, you'll never be able to take care of it. You'll never be able to take care of it. It's way beyond you. You're just a simple country preacher, and it's way beyond you. Just take what I've given you, grow the church, love the people, get to know everybody. That's what I want for you. And you know what? I say, well, thank you, man. That's the best. You see how you tame your money? Trust in him. Let me tell you a story. Remember Abraham? This is great. I love this story. Lot was abducted, stolen, if you will, by the king of Sodom. And so Abraham went to get him back. And the king of Salem was there. And we pick up the story in Genesis 14, verse 18. Let me just read this to you. Then, I'll explain it a little further. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, Salem means, of course, peace, shalom, Salem means peace, brought out bread and wine, and he was a priest of God Most High. And he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hands. Then Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. So Abraham goes out and defeats this other king that stole his nephew, got his nephew back, defeated him, took all their goods and things, and when he got back, he was met by Melchizedek, which is the pre-incarnate person of Jesus Christ, the high priest, and he gave him 1/10 of everything. Now you might say, well, wasn't that nice of him? So he still got 90% in his pocket, right? But listen to this. In verse 21, the king that was defeated, the king of Sodom, said, Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. So the king got up to him and said, Listen, you can have everything. You want it. It's a fair war. You want it fair and square. But give me the people. Let me have my people back, and you can take anything you want and everything you want. Then here's what Abram said in verse 22. With raised hand, he said, I have sworn an oath to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not a thread or a strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing by what the men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men who went with me. That's taming your mammon, isn't it? I want nothing from you. I'm sitting on $500,000 worth of goods that I took from you, horses and slaves and chariots or whatever they had. I got all of this and it's mine, but you know what? You take everything back. I don't want a thing. That's taming your money. It really is. I don't want you to tell me you got me rich, that you got me this way. I want to know that I earned it through God, through his trust. So let me end like this. I'm not saying money is bad. Of course we need it. But the Bible does tell us to make friends with it, to tame it. And I found this story I heard about an old farmer, and being an old farmer, I just thought it was an interesting story. And one day this old farmer found oil on his land, like the Beverly Hillbillies, I guess. It's just a story, but probably like that. And he found oil on his land. Well, the next thing you know, they're drilling all over the county. And you got oil on your land, and oil on your land, and oil on your land, and the drilling's going on. And finally, a man came up to him, and he said to the farmer, he said, man, you must be set for life. He said, how much? I see, I went out west. Remember those oil? You ever seen those oil wells out west like this? I went out there, and the landscape is just dotted with them. And I was talking to a guy, and I said, "Well, what do those things do?" And he said, "Well, every time it goes up and down, I make $25." And it just goes 24 hours a day, 365 for years and years and years. But anyway, this man said to the farmer, he said, "You must be really, really rich." He said, "What are you going to do with all your money?" And the old farmer scratched his head. That's what you say when you're telling the farmer joke in Vermont. He scratched his head, and he thought a minute, and he said, "I'm going to buy me another farm that ain't got no oil on it." That's the way we better, bust by the farm, but let's give up the oil. Amen.